who was in charge of putting together the deal that is making Brightline work. And I think that this provides, many pieces of this are what we need to do here in the Midwest to make trains work on heavy haul railroads. Different type of deal with the owner of the tracks, level boarding, different type of rolling stock, the package. So I'm really appreciate that Gene came up today to give us his presentation, and take it, Gene.
Before I get started, I just tell everybody in the room that I'm not a train transportation professional. I got into this crazy business as an angry architect, writer of a train in Boston back in the 1960s.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the rest is sort of history. I drove the transit agency nuts on the commuter side, so they tried to hire me to shut me up. That didn't work, so my career has followed down to Philadelphia, 10 years, Los Angeles, Orlando once, back to, let's see, Amsterdam, London, Paris, back to Northern California, back to Florida, back to Florida. So this is actually the fourth involvement of a project that I have had in Florida, and the only place in my career where I was beginning to be convinced that it would never be successful in Florida. I am pleased to report that I am totally wrong, and what you will see here is not just a plan, it is reality. I'm going to step down and have Dylan run the slides for me. The next one, I believe, is it's a brief video on the All Aboard Florida White Line.
Picture Philip sitting in traffic. Imagine a better way of coping with rush hour without a car or a care in the world. Imagine booking travel on a whim and gliding in comfort with the view of this instead of this. Or just imagine being comfortably connected on an express train with a fixed schedule. Just imagine knowing when you arrive every time. What if getting there could be as relaxing or productive as being there? Brightline, arriving 2017.
Louder, please. Louder, please. Can't hear it. I think that's his
That was just a little promo about the train arriving in 2017. The All Aboard Florida service is designed to connect basically four major population centers. Florida was developed by Henry Flagler with the Florida East Coast Railway. It had as many as 22 passenger trains a day, virtually all long-distance trains. This particular corridor was never a commuter corridor. It never had a high-density service along it. But yet Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach are the three major lower cities, all coastal and lineal, with an existing very straight railroad. The railroad was built back in the 1890s. It was built as a high-speed double-track railroad. When the passenger service ended in 1968, the original station in downtown Miami was taken down, and you'll see what it's going to look like. Screen, please go. All right. How
far is it?
No, you want to go back another one. Thank you. That's it. And the four stations that are being built now are designed to provide an express, higher speed intercity service. This is a diesel operation, and with wonderful Cummins propulsion on them. We have four of them on the property already. The service is designed to connect the major population centers and tourist markets of the state of Florida. We are very fortunate that it's a linear market, and I'll talk a little bit about what each of those markets are. First thing is that it's the only private intercity corridor passenger service in the country, and probably the first one that's been actually implemented as a totally new corridor service in around 100 years. If you don't know, Florida has overtaken New York as the third most populated state in the United States. We have California 1, Texas 2, and now Florida 3. But if you look at the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure in Florida, compared to any of the other states, it really is paling. The travel times between West Palm and Miami on Interstate 95 are almost hopeless during the peak periods. And if there's an accident, I mean, it could take you literally 3.5 hours to go 60 miles. It's really a mess. The marketplace is big. It's got a population base, but it's also the largest tourist destination in the United States. Who doesn't want to go to Disney, or who doesn't want to go to Universal? The cruise ship market out of both Port Everglades and Fort Lauderdale and Miami are exploding. Now Disney is also, they built a new terminal up at Port Everglades, which is just to the east of the Orlando area. Plus, all of the station sites that are here are adjacent to or are the original station sites of the Florida East Coast Railway passenger trains. Next one. The equipment is being built in California. It's 100% Buy America compliant, being built by Siemens in their manufacturing plant. We have the first 2 trains are on the property in Florida and are being tested now. The 3rd train is actually en route. They are labeled according to the Brightline as bright blue, bright pink, bright red, bright orange, and what did I forget? Green. Bright green. So those are the 5 colors that are out there. I was successful in having them at least paint the locomotives the same color, so if we had to move them around, they would all still be looking good with the train set. Next slide. The interiors are designed for people in comfort. The spacing, the seat pitch for the entire services, 2 classes of service, we call it Select and Smart, are 39-inch pitch. That 39-inch pitch is reflected in the window design as well, so that every seat has full window accessibility. There are no blind windows. For those people who come on that are mobility impaired in a wheelchair, they get the same big window as everybody else gets. They're not stuck in a corner. Actually, they expand by being a retractable plate underneath that comes out from the table and up. So if you have things on the table, when you don't have to take it all away to flip up the expansion of the table, and then have to put it all back down just to get in and out of the seats. We tried to think about what is going to be something that people would be able to use easily. There are at least 6 electrical connections of every pair of seats, both in conventional outlets as well as USB outlets. They are on the sides and on the tables, as you'll see a little bit later. They actually flip up. Next slide. This is one of the flip-up plugs. If you push it, it goes down and becomes level. If you want it, you push it again, and it snaps up so that you can have full use of the table, or your devices. You can see the 2 USBs and the 2 conventional plugs there. Next one. Cars themselves, we call this a touch. Is automated. As you walk down the aisles and you approach the door into the passenger compartment, automatic, nothing to press. It's a beam light that opens and closes the door. For the restrooms, the toilets automatically flush. This the blower, same device that blows that wet. A couple of cars. Passenger compartment. Next. In the following. The train is the world's first fully wheelchair accessible train. This goes way beyond the ADA requirements. Not only is it ADA accessible, the aisles are all 32 inches wide so that a wheelchair passenger can pass through the entire train going to whatever facilities that they want. Or if two people want to travel in wheelchairs in one location, they can also move their wheelchair to that location so people can travel together. It also makes it a lot easier dragging your bags down the aisle because you've got plenty of width and room, and it also makes plenty of room for our trolley carts, which serve the food and beverages, so that you can actually get by it as opposed to the airline's 12-inch wide cart and 17-inch wide aisle, and you have to deal with the 5 inches in between as you go past them. You'll see this little device at the bottom here. This is what we call a retractable gap closer. And if you can click on the connection below, you will see its development. Hopefully.
It's not up on the screen. It's not?
The sound card.
It's on my screen. Sorry about that.
Move it over.
Can you drag it over? Is it just extended?
Yeah, it's.
Probably just drag the window over.
Now?
Tell you what.
Well, maybe we could try at the end of the presentation. Show both videos again.
You want to go back to the other side and I'll keep going and you can do it at the end?
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Okay.
I love technology when it works. So, when a train comes into the station, in order to satisfy the requirements of the Florida East Coast Railway freight operation, they required a 13-inch distance between the edge of the hard platform and the car floor door. The cars were completely redesigned after an initial design so that they met the Amtrak clearance requirements to be able to operate anywhere in the system, including through the tunnels in New York. So the floor width is 10 feet, but the overall car width is 10'6". So the profile looks a lot like the Acela cars in terms of its size, but the interior design is very different. This device that you see the wheelchair going actually retracts when the door begins to close. Excuse me, the door is almost closed, and if we get the video, we'll see it how it works in action. But this then meets all of the freight clearance requirements so that at 13 inches, the freight railroad was concerned about freight movements. I understand somebody told me here that one of the railroads wants 3 feet for a high platform. I don't know what the basis of that is, but Florida East Coast Railway moves a lot of freight. They were able to run their freights through our platforms, and these gap closing devices satisfy all the clearance requirements that the railroad has. Next slide. This is our overnight running maintenance shop up in West Palm Beach. That happens to be the bright blue train that you're seeing there. Next slide. There's a lot of construction going on, almost all of it putting back what was there before 1970. It was a 2-track railroad, and thankfully when they ripped up most of the second track, they left all the sub-ballast and all of the other components in place. And this kind of makes this particular application as a private investment more affordable, largely because if we had to assemble new right-of-way or build all of the infrastructure components from scratch, probably would not be financially viable. But because it's an existing railroad, it had the double track, most of the grid structures were there. We're replacing some of them, but the work on double tracking and getting the new signal system, which will be PTC compliant, it'll be an EATC system, which is a type approved system, and it is compatible between the Florida East Coast Railways freight operation, which has a fully cab-controlled, cab-signaled railroad, and our locomotives. It is not interoperable with the EITC, the IEITC, or whatever the hell the letters are, for interoperability throughout the country, but no foreign locomotives operate on the Florida East Coast Railway. All the freight that comes into Jacksonville is interchanged with only Florida East Coast locomotives. So our locomotives are completely compatible with theirs. Go ahead, next one. This is the downtown Miami station from the air. Now, I'm showing you this for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was the original site of the Florida East Coast Railway passenger station, which was torn down in 1972. Since that time, the land, about 10 acres in the middle of downtown, spanning 9.5 city blocks, has been a surface parking lot. Now, the city wanted to continue its street grid system, so over that time period, they built the surface streets across what was the railroad lines for the old station, which meant we could not come back in at grade. So the trains are coming in at 55 feet above street level with a concourse below. You see there 5 overbuild buildings. The first one is about a 20-story building that is under construction. These are 2 residential towers. They are under construction. There's another building over here on the side. That is going to be the headquarter offices of Florida, of All Aboard Florida, Brightline Service. These 2 towers have been recently approved by the FAA for 97 stories each. They will be the tallest buildings in the southeast. And this entire complex is being able to be developed because of the passenger rail service. Passenger rail service is the catalyst for the development. It's no different than it was 125 years ago. The transportation service makes possible the private sector development. Does the transportation service stand alone? Yes, it does, but the real bucks are in the development that's created. But the development can only occur when the transportation service comes in as a hub. In addition to the All Aboard Florida service, there's 5 tracks in the station, 3 of them dedicated to All Aboard Florida at 48-inch above top of rail platform. There's 2 additional tracks which are dedicated to the Tri-Rail commuter service, which will bring in the commuter trains that currently go between West Palm and Miami Airport. They're building a new connection called the Iris Connection, which will allow the trains to come in directly into the Miami Central Station. The FRA has mandated, however, that the Tri-Rail platforms must be 24 inches above top of rail to go along with the Bombardier floor heights and the cars that they have. So the platforms will not be able to be interchanged because of the types of equipment. But that's a decision that the FRA has made. Next slide. This is the concept. The design by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill and Skoropowski architects has been designed at each of the stations to have a certain motif. The trains are all reserve trains, and in order to get into the waiting room, you must be a ticketed passenger. There is an open train hall to buy tickets. It's open to the public with its own restrooms. Once you pass through the ticket checkpoint, you are in the waiting area, and this has been intentionally designed to avoid what many of the train stations in the United States have as a problem, and that is anybody can walk in, people being panhandled. They just do not like this at all, so we have separated them out with their own waiting area, with their own restrooms and their own facilities. Again, making people feel more secure by riding the train. Now, what's happening out there? It's not just a plan, it's reality. This is what that city block site looks like in downtown Miami. This is about 2.5 weeks old. You'll see the trackway, which has come up on an incline about a half a mile north of here. These are 2 tracks. There'll be a 3rd track in here for the All Aboard Florida service, and then the Tri-Rail tracks will be on the westerly side, and that abuts the Metro Rail elevated line, which has 2 stations on the distance of our downtown Miami Central Station. In addition to that, you have something distributing to the downtown area called the Miami People Mover, which is sort of a rubber-tired bus, but it will also have a station within the Miami Central complex. So it is a total transportation location, intercity rail, commuter rail, Metro Rail and the Metro Uber, plus at the surface level, the bus connections to all of the Miami-Dade County operations. In addition to that, we partnered with Uber, Avis, Lyft. What this will do is allow us to offer a passenger the ability to make a reservation, and it's an all-reserved service, so you will never have overcrowding or standees on the trains. From point to point, if you want to be picked up at your home, brought to the station, or at the station when you arrive, have somebody waiting to take you to your ultimate destination, you can do it all online with one transaction. If you desire to have a parking space set up for yourself, you can also do that, so you don't have to get down to the station and say, oh my God, is there going to be any parking space left for me? How long is it going to take me to get from the parking space to the train? We try to think through all of the things that takes the angst out of travel by train. Maybe we haven't hit all of them, but we've sure tried a lot of them. And as I told you, I got into this business as an angry rider, so I have a very long list of things that I have. Next slide. Beneath the trackway is something called Miami Central Fair. It will be the largest restaurant community in the United States. It will span the entire distance under the tracks, and it will have world-renowned chefs from all parts and all different, I would call them, cuisines, whether it's Italian, or whether it's Spanish, or whether it's any other one. There will be a facility here to handle food, beverage, and also to support the residential complexes which are being built above the trackway. Next slide. Moving down the line, you can see the similarity in the station design at Fort Lauderdale. The entranceway and the train hall is in this area where people would come in, do ticket transactions, drop off people. Then there's escalators up. The waiting room is actually above the trackway, so that people can look down and see trains in both directions, whether they're freight or passenger while they're waiting. Separate restrooms. Checked baggage is available at all stations. About 3 or 4 minutes before a train would be arriving, passengers would be brought down by escalators and elevators to the track, to the platform level. The platform level is all designated numbers on it. You look at your ticket, it will say train 240, it'll say wait at location 6, car number 4, seat number 28. So when you get to the platform, the people will be already distributed to the places where they will board the train, rather than, this seems to be fading in and out, but rather than usually bunching, waiting for the train to stop, and then everybody runs around trying to figure out where they're supposed to get on or off. This is obviously for organizational purposes, but it has a real practical function, is it minimizes the amount of dwell time at the station. It gets people on and off the train much more quickly. Next slide. This happens to be where we are at Fort Lauderdale. That's looking much like the sketch that we just saw. Next one. This is West Palm Beach. Similar, a slightly different orientation on the location, but again, the waiting room area is above the trackway, so that people can see the trains as they approach. Next slide. And happens to be one of our trains passing by the station. This little construction here, being done by All Aboard Florida as part of the development. It's a residential complex. Do the next slide. And this is what that residential complex will look like by the end of the year, when the train service is up and running. Next slide. So our project timeline. I was actually the first dedicated All Aboard Florida employee, hired in February 9th of 2012. So here it is, barely 5 years later. It's gone from a gleam, our parent company's Fortress Eye, to reality. The trains are being tested now on the line. The opening service will start between West Palm and Fort Lauderdale with a limited service June or July. By Labor Day, there will be full service, 32 trains a day between West Palm and Miami. The delay is in the finishing of the Miami Station complex. It is a massive construction complex, and even after the service opens in Miami, that construction will continue probably for years to come. They will be putting out sometime this spring a call for making reservations. Ticketing prices have not yet been announced, but they will be market-based, and they will also be yield management-based, meaning if you're traveling in peak period times with high demand, it's likely that it's going to be more expensive, just like it is on the Acela trains. If you go and look on the Amtrak site, depends on when you want to go. The trains are initially 4 cars long, 1 business car, and 2 coaches, 3 coaches, but the trains and platforms and stations and facilities are all designed up to 10 car concepts. That will allow us to expand our capacity the cheapest way possible, and that's just adding cars to existing trains. It'll run on an hourly schedule, memory schedule, in both directions. It will run from between 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning until the last train's out around 11:30 at night. So it is a full service. Mark, you can do your calculations on where that comes in terms of return on investment. It's very exciting for me personally, since I came to Florida in 1994, then again in 2002, 2009, and so in 2012, I started working on this project, and it's been very, very exciting to see the enthusiasm and the team that's been built to operate it. I have retired from my full-time activities last December. I figured at 72 and 3 retirements under my belt so far, it's enough. My wife is saying, how much longer do you want to do this? So at this point, my primary role is to help get this service into operation. Last slide. What's going to happen after this? Well, the next logical location is Tampa to Orlando. Some of you might know, I mentioned that 2009 project. That was a ARA-funded project with $2.3 billion for a 200-mile-an-hour high-speed line electrified between Tampa and Orlando. We had a new governor who said, I don't think so. We're going to send the money back and give it to other states, which is what happened. And so that was the last publicly sponsored project in Florida. There's been at least 5 projects sponsored through the DOT as a result of state legislation passed in 1974. Given that failure and the marketplace that has been defined between Miami up to West Palm and into Orlando, that is what has made the private sector project viable. The long distance trains still continue to serve Florida. Amtrak runs 2 trains a day in each direction between New York and Florida. They will continue. We will have a fairly close connection proximity at the West Palm station. The stations are about 3 or 4 blocks apart, and there will most likely be a shuttle. The Tri-Rail trains operate from that station as well. There's 16 stations on Tri-Rail between West Palm and Miami. Takes about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Our train will take 57 minutes. So there's a definite time competitive advantage there. The state has preserved the right-of-way, however, from Orlando to Tampa. That would be the next logical extension of this service. Also, the railroad, existing Florida East Coast, runs up to Jacksonville. That will be basically the same way we're doing the Southern Leg down here. So all of the components are leading to a state network that interconnects about 75% of the population base and about 80% of the tourism base for the state of Florida. And in this particular corridor, there are between 500 and 600 million trips a year taken. We only need a very teeny small percentage of that to come onto the trains to get to about a 3 million annual ridership. So that is the Florida story. It's exciting. Look for it to happen this year. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess. We'll try this video again with better sound.
Picture Philip sitting in traffic Imagine a better way of coping with rush hour without a car or a care in the world.
And that's the same one, not the,
I know, people were saying they couldn't hear it.
With a view of this instead of this. Just imagine connected on an express train with a fixed schedule. Just imagine knowing when you'll arrive every time. What if getting there could be as relaxing or productive as being there? Brightline, arriving 17.
I have a question. I hear there's a lot of controversy about the West Palm Beach to Orlando section. Is that anywhere near being resolved, or are you still fighting the new big crowd?
yeah, there's two counties that have brought, there's actually three counties, one dropped out, that have spent millions and millions of dollars on attorneys trying to fight. So far, they haven't had any successes. They had a legislator that just tried to file a bill that would be very onerous, not only for all of our Florida, but for any passenger service within the state of Florida. And we put into jeopardy even the restoration of the service across the South Coast from New Orleans into Orlando. It's a small group of people in the Jupiter area. They're very well heeled. Bob Crandall, the former chairman of American Airlines, is one of their chief fundraisers. They basically have decided that the world as they know it will end if these trains start. Babies will turn blue, cows won't give milk. First responders will be hopelessly trapped on the other side of the railroad. Look, I've been through it in my career. It's no different than anywhere else. You're going to get opposition. I just point to South Florida between West Palm and Miami on the Tri-Rail service, which runs twice as many trains as we are proposing to run, on a two-track railroad, on a population base that's at least 5 times what it is up in the Treasure Coast area. And there are no significant issues and haven't been for the last 2 decades. So, this is strictly, we got to stop this. We don't want it in our backyard. They make the case that they were successful in preventing I-95 from being built through the city. They put it around their trash dump on the far west side. And they have made all sorts of suggestions like, well, why don't you run it down CSX? Well, we don't. CSX got their own business to run. It's one of these things that you're going to deal with. The courts are going through their process. I have a high degree of confidence when that's done, you will see the financing fall into place and you will see the construction finished into Orlando. And I should mention that Orlando Station is actually about 50 to 60% completed. It's being built by Orlando International Airport. We are simply a tenant. We are one of 4 rail operators that will be coming into the new South Terminal at Orlando Airport. They have actually built the right-of-way through the airport. The maintenance facility, the major maintenance facility for all of Florida is on the airport property, just south of the airport station. People ask me, well, how come the airport's done all of this? I said, well, there have been at least 5 or 6 proposals for high-speed rail in Florida, and the airport's been expecting a train for the last 30 years. So they figured out, let's provide the right-of-way and how we're going to get it in and how we're going to get it through the airport. So, like I say, I'm very optimistic that logic will prevail. Best I can say. Yes, sir?
Wonderful railroads, thank you. West Palm, the Magnolia part to Miami Airport, is that going to then just go over the Metro Rail line somehow to get to China?
It's, I think it's Magnolia Park, which is the upper end of the Tri-Rail service. When it comes down to the interchange station at Miami Metro Rail, it goes under the Metro Rail and then continues south to the airport today. The new line will stop at that Metro Rail station and then make a diverging move to the east with a new connection that has been funded by the feds to the Tri-Rail people. There's a separate agreement between Tri-Rail and the Florida East Coast Railway to build this connection. They will then take every other train that currently goes to the airport and route it into Miami Central, and then operate a shuttle train from the interchange station with Miami Metro down to the airport. So a person on existing services will be able to get to the airport on every train, but every other train will then go into the Miami Central Station.
Is the new Fort Lauderdale station going to be elevated?
No, the new Fort Lauderdale station is at grade. Yeah, just north of Broward Boulevard. Okay, a couple over here.
Gene, good afternoon. The sale of FEC, what impact will it have on Brightline? Or is Brightline going to remain independent from FEC then?
No, the Brightline is a separate company with contractual agreements with the Florida East Coast Railway. Those contractual agreements go with any sale. There's virtually no impact. The companies are establishing a joint dispatching company that will be responsible for both services, and both parties will have a financial interest in it, so that there's no perceived preference for one or the other, but there is a clearly established preference for passenger services at priority.
Describe the funding for this. Is this mainly Fentress, or is this a group of investors? And how difficult was it to line up the fence financing?
Well, I'm not the finance person, but I will tell you that the parent company of All Aboard Florida, Florida East Coast Industries, and until the sale occurs, Florida East Coast Railway, is Fortress Investment Group in New York. That's a management fund that had like $63 billion in assets, and they were just bought by a Japanese investment company for like 2.3 trillion or whatever the number is. I suspect that these investments are not being made blindly, that they're looking at the potential for further development in Florida. The explosion in the population in Florida, the tourism base in Florida, the cruise market base in Florida, it's not going to stop. People are moving into Florida at the rate of 1,000 people per day. Yes, sir.
What about fares? The fares that you're going to charge the Brightline, are those going to be comparable to Amtrak? Are they going to be less or more?
Depends on the time of day you want to travel. But this is a private venture. It's going after a particular market. This is not public transit, so don't look for cheap fares, but look for high quality, high level of service, high level of reliability. This is a highly customer-focused endeavor. If you want to travel at the evening hours after the peak, you probably can get very good fares, but it's going to be comparable to what it costs you to drive to be traveling during peak periods.
Hi, Gene. Quick question though. So it's a good story for Florida, but on your last slide you mentioned, or there was a bullet point there about outside of Florida, other opportunities. So being that FEC's territory is within Florida, that would probably entail talking to other rail operators, class ones, regional railroads. Are there other corridors out there that have enough real estate available that would be owned privately that would make this model work?
I believe that is part of the reason that our recently moved Chief Executive Officer has gone into a new position called Executive Director of Florida East Coast Industries to sniff out other opportunities where the concept that's been applied here can be applied elsewhere. There certainly are lots of other corridors, many of which may not have rail service at all today, that could be developed. We do know that the private railways have been watching this, because most of them, even though they're not in a real estate business, they still own a lot of property in the downtowns of many of the cities. I mean, I look at, Norfolk Southern, I look at Atlanta to Charlotte. You've got this southeast corridor that's been talked about from Charlotte to Washington. It's a logical extension to get it into Atlanta. And there's an enormous amount of property that could be developed. Now, if you go back far enough in history, That's what the railroads did. They used the railroad as the catalyst to make development opportunities. I mean, it's no different than the highways. I mean, why does everybody want a highway interchange? Because they own the property next to it, and they know what the value is gonna be as soon as they build that interchange, because now it has access to the system. If you go and look at Penn Central, you recall Penn Central? Anybody old enough to remember Penn Central? That was a railroad, okay? But they're still listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Well, what do? They're real estate. They spun off the part of the business that really wasn't making them any money, which was the railroad side, and kept the real estate side. The luxury of having a private developer or private development is that you have the ability to do both. I've worked about half my career in the public sector and half in the private sector. When I was in the public sector, I said, man, this is a great opportunity. Let's buy all of this land around here because that's what's going to become valuable. I said, no, you can't do that because the federal requirements are that you can only buy as much land as you need for the transportation service. So what happens to the land around it? Well, the land around it then gets sold to a developer who then says, man, I'm going to build around this station. It's a great location. So they build it. And the local community says, this is great because now I can tax that and we get more tax revenue. And after it's all built and it requires a subsidy to run the public transit service, both of them gripe and complain about the money that they have to pay to support the transit service, which is what made possible that development in the first place. This logic is lost on most of our elected officials. But, you know, this business is not rocket science. It's about land development opportunities. It's about market capture, the value capture of the land that you are creating that value in when you build the transportation service. In this particular case, especially at Miami Central, which is like 3 million square feet of developable building structures, that couldn't happen with that level of intensity without the rail service. So in very, very real terms, that rail service is the catalyst that is making that possible.
One last question.
What, Gene, you've been around the industry a ton,
150 years.
Just be sure to invite me to your 200th anniversary. What advice would you have for a group like the Midwest High Speed Rail Association?
Well, this association has had remarkable success. You may not think that you have, but I remember this guy when he had no gray hair, and I was a board member at NARP, which is 35 years on the NARP board. You see Ronnie sitting over there. Back in the early 1970s, this little group came, and this guy named Rick Harnish said, will you guys think you could provide us with a grant of about $50,000 to get this organization started? And we did. And it has been very successful over time. You've made great progress. You're going to have wonderful locomotives, I can tell you, because the locomotives that we have are exactly the same, except that we made them look a little nicer on the front nose. Who knows? I mean, I don't know how the outcome on the coaches is going to be, but these coaches will work here too.